Welcome to the Vault of Tales, a treasure trove of science fiction stories. Today, we embark on a journey through the infinite unknown, where Orion and Selara step beyond a mysterious gateway and witness visions of a future shaped by their choices. Faced with the power to alter destiny, they must decide whether to embrace the knowledge before them or carve their own path among the stars. As the portal fades, they realize that the true key to the future lies not in ancient technology, but in their will to forge a new era. Let's get started. The vast expanse of space was cold and lifeless, a silent tomb stretching endlessly in all directions. Inside the cockpit of the Eclipse, a battered exploration craft scarred by years of perilous journeys, Orion Carter sat motionless, his steely gray eyes locked onto the flickering display. Before him loomed Zeta-17, an icy world adrift in the abyss, its surface bathed in an eerie, pale blue glow. It was unlike any planet he had ever encountered, and Orion had seen more than most. Just a simple run, he muttered, his voice rough, as if to reassure himself. Scan for resources, collect the data, and get out. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. Once, Orion Carter had been a legend among the Galactic Union, a fearless expedition pilot, undefeated in the unknown. Now, he was a shadow of the man he used to be. The Elysium mission had taken everything from him. It had taken Kara, his comrade, his closest friend, and with her, every last ambition he had ever held. Since then, he had drifted from system to system, a scavenger for hire, avoiding the remnants of his own past. But the signal from Zeta-17 had stirred something within him, a faint, fragmented transmission, like a whisper from the void. Probably just interference, he told himself, but his curiosity, the only part of his former self that refused to die, would not let him ignore it. As the eclipse inched closer, the planet's frozen surface came into sharper view. Thick ice sheets blanketed the terrain, yet through deep fractures in the crust, an unnatural glow pulsed, as though something vast and ancient slumbered beneath. "There's something down there," Orion murmured, gripping the controls tighter. The ship trembled as it breached the planet's thin atmosphere. Orion steadied his hands, adjusting the thrusters to counter the brutal crosswinds. But before he could react, an unseen force clamped onto the Eclipse, dragging it downward. Alarms blared, red warning lights flashed across the cockpit. "Shit, not good," Orion growled, slamming his fist against the console. The force intensified, a vortex of unknown energy spiraled around the ship, yanking it toward the icy wasteland below. Metal screeched as the Eclipse crashed into the frozen surface, sending shockwaves rippling through the ice. Orion was thrown violently from his seat, his head colliding hard against the bulkhead. A sharp sting lanced through his skull, warm blood trickling down his brow. Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself upright, coughing through the haze of smoke. Life support, still online, he muttered, scanning the cockpit's damaged displays. He unlatched the hatch and stepped out into the alien cold. The chill of Zeta-17 hit him like 1,000 blades, cutting through his gear. A dim, distant star cast long, distorted shadows over the ice, twisting the landscape into something surreal. Then he saw it, half buried in the frost. An immense structure loomed, a ruin of another world, its jagged spires piercing through the ice like the remnants of a forgotten god. From the fissures in its surface, that same spectral blue light pulsed, slow and steady, like the breath of something not quite dead. This isn't just another frozen rock, Orion thought, his pulse quickening. He moved cautiously, boots crunching against the frost. The closer he got, the more the unease clawed at him. This wasn't natural. The sharp lines, the carved symbols etched into the ruins, this was the work of something far beyond human understanding. "Who built this?" he murmured, his fingers instinctively brushing against the grip of his sidearm. Then the ground shifted. A deep tremor rolled through the ice. Cracks webbed out beneath his feet. Before he could react, the surface split open, and Orion plummeted into the abyss. Darkness swallowed him whole. The impact sent pain shooting through his body as he crashed onto cold stone. He gasped, struggling to catch his breath. Around him, the cavern pulsed with the same unnatural blue light, casting an eerie glow over the walls, massive pillars adorned with intricate carvings, stretching upward into the unknown. And then he saw them, rows upon rows of cryogenic pods, stretching endlessly into the darkness. Within each, faint silhouettes rested, silent, unmoving, entombed in time. But only one pod remained intact, its surface aglow with an ethereal shimmer. Orion's breath hitched. Inside, a woman, no, an alien, lay motionless. Her skin shimmered in hues of pale blue, her silver hair flowing weightlessly around her. An intricate, ancient-looking armor adorned her form, its violet sheen radiating an aura of lost power. A single word was etched into the glass. Selara. Orion whispered the name under his breath, his fingers brushing against the icy control panel. The moment he made contact, the system whirred to life. Steam hissed as the pod released its seal. With a soft exhale, the figure stirred, then her eyes opened, brilliant, violet, piercing. They locked onto him, sharp with suspicion, edged with something deeper, something ancient. She spoke. Her voice was like the echo of a distant wind, a language he could not comprehend. Orion didn't move. He didn't need to understand her words to know one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. Then, from the shadows, a voice, a cold, menacing whisper, resonated through the chamber. "Intruder, you have awakened the past." Orion spun, his gun drawn, but there was nothing there. Only the flickering blue light, and the creeping realization that they were no longer alone. A voice echoed from the darkness, making Orion startle. He turned swiftly, gray eyes scanning the vast chamber. But there was no one in sight, only the dim blue glow from the ancient walls reflected upon the silent cryopods. "You do not belong here." The voice came again, closer this time, as if emanating from the walls themselves. A chill ran down Orion's spine. He had no idea what he was facing, but every instinct screamed that this place was far from safe. Before him, Selara, the alien girl he had just freed from cryo sleep, stepped forward with unearthly grace. She moved as if weightlessness was second nature, her body effortlessly adjusting to the low gravity. Her pale blue skin shimmered under the ambient light, casting an eerie, ethereal glow around her. Long silver hair drifted in the cold air, and her luminous violet eyes locked onto Orion. Filled with caution, "Selara." Orion repeated her name, his voice calm, measured. He raised a hand in a universal gesture of goodwill. She did not respond. Instead, she spoke in a language he did not understand, soft yet commanding. Ancient yet alive, the cadence of her words carried something deeper than meaning, a warning. "I don't understand," Orion admitted, shaking his head slightly. "I am Orion, Orion Carter." Selara frowned, studying him, as if trying to decipher the sounds he had just spoken. She stepped closer, her gaze never wavering. Orion felt something strange in the air around her, a presence, an energy, as though reality itself trembled in her wake. Then, without warning, she raised a hand, palm open. A faint violet glow radiated from her fingers, enveloping Orion in a soft, pulsating light. Warmth spread through his body, not threatening, but invasive, as though she was sifting through the very fabric of his being. "Orion," she repeated, this time with understanding. Her voice softened, curiosity replacing the initial caution. "Where do you come from?" Orion's breath caught. She had learned his language in seconds. "I come from Earth," he said, still reeling from what had just happened. "I'm an explorer, a pilot." Selara nodded, as if piecing together fragmented memories. Her gaze drifted over the chamber, and for the first time, Orion saw something beyond wariness in her eyes, sorrow. "This place," she whispered, her voice laced with loss. "It has changed." Orion hesitated, watching her carefully. "How long have you been here?" Selara turned back to him, and in her glowing eyes, he saw something ancient, something broken. "Thousands of years," she said softly. "My people are gone. I am the last." A weight settled over Orion. He wanted to offer some kind of comfort, but what could he possibly say? Before he could respond, the voice from the darkness returned, louder this time, filled with menace. "Intruder, you have awakened the past. You are unworthy of this place." Selara stiffened. Her eyes glowed fiercely as she turned toward the sound. "The Harbinger," she murmured. "It still lives." Orion's muscles tensed. "The Harbinger? What is that?" Selara's voice was steady, but there was a fire beneath her words. "An ancient intelligence. It was created to safeguard this place, but it has become trapped in its own endless loop of protection. It will not let us leave." A cold dread coiled in Orion's gut. "Then what do we do?" Selara met his gaze, determination burning bright. "We convince it to let us go, or we destroy it." The Harbinger's voice erupted once more, laced with rage. "You failed once before, Selara. This time, you will not escape." The ground trembled, walls shifted, grinding against one another as a hidden passageway unfolded before them. Selara grabbed Orion's hand. "We have no time," she said urgently. "The Harbinger will not let us go without a fight." Orion barely had time to react before she pulled him forward. Into the darkness beyond, the blue glow of the chamber faded behind them, swallowed by the abyss. Darkness clung to the narrow passage, broken only by the faint, ghostly glow of luminescent stones embedded in the walls and ceiling. The cold bit through Orion's flight suit, and his breath came heavy in the low-gravity environment. He stayed close behind Selara, his every movement deliberate, his boots pressing against the ancient floor in contrast to her near-weightless grace, like a silent dance between life and death. "Where are we going?" Orion asked, his voice echoing through the confined corridor, swallowed quickly by the eerie silence. Selara didn't turn back. Her silver hair shimmered under the dim light. "The Harbinger controls everything here," she said, her voice edged with unwavering resolve. "It won't let us leave so easily. We need to reach the central core, where it resides." Orion furrowed his brow, adjusting to the weightless pull of his steps. "The central core? And what exactly do you plan to do once we get there?" Selara stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her violet eyes burned with an intensity that sent a chill through him. "The Harbinger is more than just a guardian AI. It is the key to the gateway. But it is trapped, bound by the past, unable to distinguish ally from enemy. If we cannot convince it, we will never leave this place." Orion processed her words carefully. "So you've tried before?" he asked. "And failed?" Selara averted her gaze, a shadow passing over her face. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I tried to break its hold, but the Harbinger was too strong. It trapped me in ice, forcing me into slumber for millennia." A deep sense of unease settled in Orion's chest. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice steady. "This time, we face it together." Selara hesitated, her expression unreadable. Then, just for a fleeting moment, a rare smile crossed her lips. "Let's hope you're not lying." Before Orion could respond, the ground trembled, the narrow corridor twisted open, its walls shifting like living stone, expanding into a vast, cathedral-like chamber. The dim cyan glow faded, replaced by an overwhelming, radiant white light. Orion shielded his eyes, his pulse hammering as his vision adjusted. When he finally lowered his arm, his breath caught in his throat. They stood within an impossible space, a void where time itself seemed fractured. The walls no longer existed. Instead, an endless expanse of stars and galaxies twisted and swirled, distorting in chaotic spirals. The floor beneath them was transparent, revealing an abyss that stretched into infinity. "Where are we?" Orion whispered, his voice barely audible. Selara scanned the surreal surroundings, her stance wary. "We have entered the Harbinger's domain," she said. "It is testing us." A voice, deep and resonant like distant thunder, echoed through the void. "Intruder, you have disturbed the past. You do not belong here." Orion turned sharply, searching for the source of the voice. "We are not your enemy," he called out, his voice carried away by the shifting space around him. "We only seek to understand." The Harbinger did not reply immediately. Instead, the swirling cosmos around them flickered, shifting into fragmented images, echoes of a long-buried past. Orion watched in stunned silence as towering cities of ice crumbled under an unseen force. As warriors clad in Nyxari battle armor fought and fell, their blood staining the frozen earth, and then, Selara, trapped in a stasis chamber, her eyes filled with a silent plea before darkness consumed her. "This is my past," she whispered, her voice laced with sorrow. "The Harbinger is showing me everything that was lost." Orion looked at her, saw the unspoken grief reflected in her glowing violet eyes. "You tried to stop something, didn't you?" he asked gently. Selara nodded, her jaw tightening. "My people opened the gateway, but what came through was beyond our control. The Harbinger was created to ensure it would never happen again." Orion exhaled slowly, his mind racing, the weight of history pressed against them, suffocating in its intensity. But before he could respond, the Harbinger's voice returned, reverberating with a finality that sent a chill down his spine. "You cannot change the past, Selara, you can only kneel before it." Selara lifted her head, defiance flaring in her eyes. "We don't seek to rewrite the past," she said, "we seek to forge a future." A long silence followed, then, the swirling visions of the past shattered like glass, dissolving into nothingness. Before them, a colossal gateway emerged from the void, its edges pulsing with an eerie, unearthly glow. "This is your final trial," the Harbinger decreed. "Pass through, and your fate will be decided." Orion met Selara's gaze, his pulse quickening. "What now?" She reached for his hand, her fingers cold but firm. "We go together," she said, determination burned in her eyes. "This is our last chance." The colossal door groaned open, its ancient stone grinding against time itself. Orion and Selara stepped forward, entering a vast chamber where space itself seemed to stretch beyond comprehension. The ceiling dissolved into a simulated night sky, glittering with 1,000 radiant stars. Suspended at the center of the room, luminous crystals floated weightlessly, flickering like celestial embers. They formed the outline of an incomplete constellation, each fragment glowing in a different hue: deep sapphire blue, burning crimson, ethereal violet, like scattered remnants of a long-forgotten enigma. Orion took a slow step forward, his storm-gray eyes locked onto the hovering crystals. "What is this?" he murmured, his voice laced with awe, as if gazing upon the cosmos for the first time. Selara approached, her violet gaze shimmering with recognition. "A spatial riddle," she stated, her tone measured yet resolute. "The Harbinger is testing us." She reached out and touched a violet crystal. Instantly, a surge of light erupted, brief but intense, like the shockwave of a dying star. Selara froze, her expression going vacant, as if her mind had been momentarily pulled into another realm. Orion stepped forward, alarmed. "Selara, are you all right?" She shuddered, her breath shallow as she regained focus. I saw them," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "The Nyxari, walking through the gateway. None ever returned. The Harbinger is showing me the past." Orion scanned the floating crystals, his mind piecing together fragments of an unseen puzzle. "So, what are we supposed to do with these?" Selara's gaze sharpened, a newfound determination igniting in her eyes. "We align them," she said. "Each crystal represents a real star system. If we complete the constellation, the path will open." Orion exhaled, steadying his thoughts. He glanced up at the artificial sky, searching for patterns. "Do you recognize this formation?" Selara shook her head, silver strands of hair slipping across her face. "No, but I can feel their energy. We have to trust our instincts." She reached for a sapphire crystal and carefully shifted it into place. As soon as it settled, a faint energy line connected it to another, weaving a delicate strand of cosmic light. Orion caught on quickly, moving the remaining pieces like a conductor leading a celestial orchestra. "Keep going," he urged, his pulse quickening. "We're close," Selara confirmed, her voice tinged with hope. They worked in tandem, guided by an unseen force, each movement unraveling fragments of a lost history. As the pieces aligned, visions flickered, Nyxari warships cutting through the void, warriors falling in an unseen battle, and finally, the gateway itself, devouring all who dared to pass. Then, suddenly, a crimson crystal refused to move. Orion pushed harder, gritting his teeth. "It won't budge," he growled, sweat forming at his brow. Selara studied it, realization flashing in her eyes. "It needs both of us," she said, her voice firm. "Together." Orion nodded, pressing his palm against the crystal alongside hers. A pulse of energy exploded outward, rattling the chamber. The crimson fragment slowly drifted into place. A brilliant glow erupted as the constellation completed itself, an ethereal formation of Nyxari origins. Hauntingly beautiful and unfathomably ancient. The room trembled. Before them, a swirling rift emerged, its spiraling vortex shimmering like the edge of a collapsing star, leading deeper into the ruins. "We did it," Orion exhaled, a rare smile breaking across his face. Selara returned his smile, but her eyes remained wary. "This is only the beginning," she murmured, her voice lowering. "The Harbinger won't let us pass so easily." The spatial gate hissed shut behind Orion and Selara with a low, metallic whisper, sealing them within the depths of the ancient ruin. A dim, ghostly blue light seeped from the walls, flickering like the lost souls of a forgotten past. The air was frigid, unnaturally still, so suffocatingly silent that time itself felt frozen in this forsaken place. A shiver ran down Orion's spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching, lurking just beyond the veil of darkness. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice echoing hollowly through the vast chamber. Swallowed by the eerie quiet, Selara stepped forward, her violet eyes glowing softly in the dimness. "The lowest level of the ruins," she answered, her tone steady but laced with an undertone of something unreadable. "This is where the last remnants of my people remain." She reached out, fingers grazing the cold surface of a wall etched with ancient symbols. The moment she made contact, the chamber trembled ever so slightly, and the air shimmered as figures emerged from the void. Digital phantoms of the Nyxari, tall, armored specters, floated through the space like souls bound to an unbroken cycle. They whispered in a language lost to time, their voices a haunting blend of sorrow and desperation, reverberating through the chamber like wind wailing through an abandoned graveyard. Orion stood frozen, his breath shallow. "What are they?" His voice was barely above a whisper. His gaze locked onto the spectral forms drifting around them. Selara's expression softened, a glimmer of tears reflecting in her luminous eyes. "The last of the Nyxari," she murmured, "trapped here, imprisoned in digitized memories, a warning that echoes through eternity." One of the figures drifted closer, its hollow, milky eyes flashing with something that resembled pain. "You do not belong here," it intoned, its voice a distorted echo from the abyss. "The gate only brings oblivion." Orion turned to Selara, searching her face. "You knew this, didn't you?" She held his gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, she nodded. "I was here before," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I tried to save them, but I was too late. The Harbinger sealed me away, put me into stasis while they suffered." Before Orion could respond, another spirit drifted forward, reaching out. Its translucent fingers barely brushed Selara's forehead, and a blinding white light flared. Selara gasped, her body trembling. "I see it now," she choked out, her voice tinged with horror. The gate was opened, and an entire galaxy was reduced to ashes. Orion stepped forward, steadying her with a firm hand on her shoulder. Then activating it again, he exhaled slowly. "Would that be a mistake?" Selara lifted her gaze, eyes burning with newfound resolve. "No," she said, her voice unwavering. "The past is a lesson, not a fate. We must correct what was broken." "Then what do we do?" Orion asked, his tone low, steady, ready. She turned back to the phantoms, her expression softening. "We set them free," she said. "They've been trapped long enough. They deserve peace." Without hesitation, they began. Selara moved to the center of the chamber, inhaling deeply. Then, with a slow exhale, she whispered ancient incantations, words lost to all but the remnants of her kind. Her voice was a melody of power and sorrow, like waves crashing upon the shores of a long-forgotten world. Her hands danced through the air, tracing glowing sigils, intricate spirals, and celestial glyphs that pulsed with violet energy. The symbols hung in the air, vibrating with raw power, forming a lattice of light around the specters. This was Nyxari sorcery, an art long buried with her ancestors. Now awakened to right an age-old wrong, Orion, standing a few steps away, pulled a compact analysis device from his belt, a sleek, metallic tool gleaming faintly under the dim glow. He knelt, pressing it against the cold stone floor, his fingers moving swiftly across the interface. The device emitted a soft beeping, thin red beams scanning the ancient walls. "This energy," he muttered, eyes narrowing at the fluctuating data. "It's not just a recording. It's a digital prison." They're locked in a repeating loop. Adjusting the device, he fine-tuned the frequency, searching for a way to disrupt the invisible bindings that held the spirits captive. They moved in perfect sync, two halves of a singular purpose. Selara swept her hand forward, sending a brilliant sigil spiraling toward the eastern wall, where the energy was densest. "Orion, focus there," she called, her voice taut with urgency. He nodded, recalibrating his device before firing a concentrated electromagnetic pulse at the point she indicated. Selara's sigil collided with the energy barrier, triggering a small but violent burst of light. The walls trembled, cracks spider webbing outward. The ghostly wails of the system's dying grip filled the chamber like a final, desperate plea. Selara did not stop. She stepped toward one of the spirits, tracing a larger sigil in the air, this one glowing with the brilliance of a silver moon. "Help me guide them," she murmured to Orion. He adjusted his device, activating an amplified resonance field to synchronize with her magic. The sigil flared, enveloping the spirit, and Orion saw the readings spike, then dip. The system was breaking. "Hold on," he shouted as his device shuddered violently in his grip. Then, a brilliant explosion of light erupted from the heart of the chamber. A tidal wave of energy surged outward, flooding every shadowed corner with pure, searing radiance. The spirits quivered, their forms fracturing, shattering into countless fragments of light, dissolving like petals carried away by an unseen breeze. They faded, soundlessly, painlessly, leaving behind only silence. Selara exhaled, her shoulders finally easing. "It's done," she whispered. A rare smile ghosted her lips, faint, weary, but undeniably real. Orion looked at her, and for the first time since stepping into this place, the cold weight in his chest lifted. Warmth replaced it, a quiet, inexplicable warmth. "You gave them freedom." They stood there, bathed in the chamber's fading glow, their eyes meeting in the dim light. Something unspoken passed between them, a bond, forged in trials, strengthened in sacrifice. The silence that followed the vanishing phantoms was shattered by a violent tremor, as if the very earth roared in fury. From the center of the chamber, a blinding white light erupted, engulfing Orion and Selara. They raised their arms to shield their eyes, breaths sharp and ragged as the brilliance consumed every shadow. When the radiance finally dimmed, a colossal entity emerged before them, not a solid form, but a swirling mass of shimmering light, pulsing like a living star. Its voice rumbled through the air, deep as distant thunder, shaking the very fabric of reality. "Intruders," the harbinger declared, its tone both imperious and icy. "You have disturbed the past, but the future does not belong to you." Orion stepped forward, his gray eyes cold yet burning with resolve. He stood tall, unyielding before the luminous being. "We are not your enemies," he stated, his voice steady and firm. "We seek answers, not destruction." The harbinger remained silent, its light flickering as if in contemplation. Then, suddenly, it flared into a searing crimson, blazing like the infernos of a dying world. "Humans," it thundered, "have known nothing but conquest and ruin. You are a stain upon this galaxy, no different from those who once annihilated it." Selara stepped forward, her silver hair flowing, violet eyes gleaming like twin stars. "You're wrong," she interjected, her voice as sharp as a blade. "Orion is no destroyer. He helped free the Nyxari spirits, something even you failed to do." The Harbinger's glow shifted to a deep, spectral violet, cold and piercing. It loomed toward Selara, its voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "You, Selara, are the traitor. You abandoned your kind, left them to vanish into the abyss. Your words hold no weight." Orion felt his pulse hammer in his skull. Fury ignited in his chest. He lunged forward, stepping protectively in front of Selara, his gaze locked onto the swirling entity. "You know nothing," he roared, voice raw with defiance. "Humanity is more than destruction. We build, we explore, we fight to survive, we dream of the stars, something you, a machine without a soul, could never understand." The Harbinger hesitated, its radiance wavered, shifting to a cool, contemplative blue. A heavy silence followed, stretching into infinity. Then, its voice returned, edged with challenge. "Words are easy. If you believe in your worth, prove it through action. I will grant you one final trial, a battle of survival. Triumph, and the gate shall open." Orion turned to Selara, searching her violet gaze for agreement. "What do we do?" Selara clenched her fists. "There's no turning back," she answered, voice steel and fire. "We fight." The Harbinger moved, not with limbs, but with a sweeping surge of energy. The chamber dissolved, its stone walls melting into the void. In their place rose an immense battleground suspended among the stars. Beneath their feet stretched a transparent platform, floating over a bottomless abyss, a spiraling black maw that devoured even the faintest glimmers of light. "The battle begins," the Harbinger intoned, its voice echoing like an unrelenting decree. From the depths of the void, shadowy figures emerged, their forms coalescing into towering warriors clad in radiant armor, weapons of pure energy gripped in their hands. They circled Orion and Selara, their hollow eyes devoid of mercy, brimming with an unshakable will to kill. Orion drew his sidearm, his stance firm as he pressed his back against Selara's. "We will survive," he murmured, his voice low but burning with fire. "Together." Selara nodded, her fingers crackling with Nyxari energy, a deep violet glow illuminating her hands. "We will win," she vowed, her eyes alight with unwavering determination. And then, the battle ignited. Orion fired the first shot, streaks of sapphire energy tearing through the void. Selara moved in tandem, her hands unleashing arcs of violet lightning. Together, they plunged into the fray, unaware of what awaited them beyond the final gate. The arena trembled, a cosmic battlefield carved from the fabric of space itself. The shattered echoes of crumbling stone filled the void, resonating like the dying heartbeat of an ancient god. Towering statues, once silent sentinels lost to time, began to crack. Fractures ran jagged across their surfaces before chunks of rock broke away, revealing the warriors beneath. The Nyxari, tall, imposing figures clad in shimmering violet armor, their very presence exuding an aura of forgotten power. Each one wielded a scythe-like weapon, its curved blade pulsing with dark energy, vibrating so intensely that the air itself splintered into tiny arcs of violet lightning. Orion's grip tightened around his plasma pistol. He flicked the power regulator to maximum, his pulse hammering against his ribs. "What the hell are those things?" he called out, eyes darting between the awakened giants. Selara stood beside him, her amethyst gaze glowing with recognition, and something else. "Dread, AI constructs," she murmured, her voice taut as a drawn blade. "Recreations of Nyxari warriors, forged by the Harbinger to protect the gateway at all costs." The realization sank like cold iron in Orion's gut. "Then we take them down," he said, steady despite the weight of the moment. The first warrior moved, a blur of speed impossible for its size. Its scythe carved through the void, leaving behind a violet afterimage as it descended toward Orion. Instinct kicked in, he rolled, feeling the heat of displaced air graze past his shoulder as the blade struck the ground, cracking the transparent floor beneath them. Orion came up firing. Plasma bolts blazed in rapid succession, streaking toward the warrior's chest. The shots struck home, but harmlessly ricocheted off its armor, scattering in weak, sputtering sparks. Damn it, Orion cursed, backpedaling. They're shielded. Selara inhaled sharply, steadying herself. Then, she raised a hand, fingers splayed, palm burning with a soft, ethereal glow. The energy surged outward, tendrils of violet light wrapping around the warrior like living chains. The construct jerked to a halt, frozen mid-step. Now, Orion, she shouted. No hesitation. Orion aimed for the small gap at the base of the warrior's helmet and squeezed the trigger. The plasma round found its mark, detonating within. The construct convulsed, then shattered into fragments of luminous dust, its form dissolving like mist in the wind. One down, Orion muttered. Selara barely had time to warn him before the remaining two attacked in unison. Their movements were synchronized, efficient, inhuman. Scythes hummed through the air, the battlefield erupting in an electric storm of violet arcs. We need to split them up, Orion barked. I'll keep them moving, you lock them down. Selara nodded, shifting her stance. Be careful. Orion dove into motion, zigzagging between the towering constructs, firing erratic bursts to hold their attention. The warriors followed, their lethal blades cutting through the space where he had stood a mere fraction of a second earlier. He rolled, jumped, twisted, pushing his reflexes to the brink, forcing them to chase him, to leave themselves vulnerable. Selara's hands burned with raw energy. She focused, channeling every ounce of her power. Two bolts of Nyxari light erupted from her palms, striking the warriors square in the chest. Their forms jerked, armor shuddering violently. The energy twisted around them, tightening like an unseen fist. Orion! Now, she gasped. Orion skidded to a stop, raised his pistol, too quick. Precise shots. The plasma rounds struck their exposed weak points. The constructs convulsed before imploding, bursting into spirals of violet luminescence that faded into nothingness. Silence fell over the battlefield. Then, the arena rumbled. From the far end, an enormous structure began to take shape, a doorway, impossibly vast, its frame etched with ancient, unknowable symbols. At its center spun the true gateway, a swirling vortex of pale blue light, radiating an aura of both wonder and unease. Selara stepped forward, breath shallow. The gateway, she whispered. It's real. Orion followed her gaze, his expression unreadable. And it could lead us anywhere, he murmured, to the edge of the galaxy, or straight into oblivion. A heavy pause lingered between them. Selara's expression hardened. Not yet, she said, shaking her head. We need to understand it first. Orion nodded, exhaling slowly. Together, they stepped toward the gateway. The vortex pulsed, an unspoken invitation, or warning. After defeating the AI warriors, Orion and Selara stood there, breaths heavy, hearts still pounding with adrenaline and expectation. But before they could take another step, the air trembled, space itself seemed to ripple. Then, from the void, the Harbinger emerged once more. The colossal entity of light hovered between them and the gateway, its shimmering form shifting like a living barrier, pulsing with unfathomable energy. You have proven yourself. The Harbinger's voice resonated through the chamber, deep and thunderous like the echo of a dying star. You have overcome the trials, and so, you have earned the right to choose your own fate. But I ask you this, are you certain? Will you step forward? The words carried a weight beyond mere inquiry. It was a warning. This gateway is not merely a path. The Harbinger continued, it is a turning point, a single choice that will carve itself into the fabric of your destiny, forever. Selara's violet eyes flickered with uncertainty. She felt the gravity of the moment pressing against her chest. If she crossed that threshold, she would sever the last fragile ties to her Nyxari past, the echoes of a lost empire, the memories of a people long faded into dust. But beyond the portal lay something unknown, something new, a future that she and Orion could forge together. She hesitated, her fingers curled into a fist. Her breath trembled between fear and hope. Then, she felt a hand on her shoulder. Orion had stepped beside her. His touch was steady, grounding. She could feel the quiet strength in him, like an anchor in a storm. "You don't have to face this alone," he said, his voice low, resolute. "Whatever's beyond that portal, we face it together." Selara turned to him, in his storm-gray eyes. She saw no doubt, no hesitation, only trust. "I don't know what I should do," she admitted softly. "The past is all I've ever known, but I don't want to be bound by it anymore." Orion gave a rare smile, one that softened the hardened lines of his face, warming the cold steel in his expression. "The past is only a starting point," he said. "The future is what we make it, and I believe we're strong enough to face whatever comes next together." For the first time, the radiant being before them was silent. The Harbinger's glow dimmed, its hues shifting into a deep emerald green, as if contemplating their words. When it finally spoke again, its voice had lost some of its cold omnipotence, now softer, almost understanding. "Then go," it said, "but remember this. Once you cross, there is no turning back." Selara met Orion's gaze once more, and this time, there was no hesitation. "I want to move forward," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "I want to build something new with you." Orion nodded, his grip on her shoulder tightening just slightly, reassuring. "Then let's do this." Together, they stepped toward the gateway. The portal pulsed, its soft blue glow stretching outward, wrapping around them like a silent embrace. The remnants of the battle, the shattered ruins, the dust of fallen warriors, faded into the background. Ahead, the unknown awaited. "The future is not always light," the Harbinger warned one last time, its voice now distant, like the whisper of a dying star. "Be prepared." Orion and Selara stopped at the threshold. The glow of the portal intensified, a vortex of swirling light that seemed to hum with possibility and danger alike. Orion turned to her. "Are you ready?" His voice carried a note of excitement now, the tone of an explorer standing at the edge of an uncharted world. Selara exhaled, and then she smiled. A true smile, bright and unguarded, the first he had ever seen from her. "I am," she said, their fingers intertwined, and then, together, they stepped forward, into the light. For a brief moment, everything dissolved. No up, no down, no time, no weight, just the vast infinity of existence stretching all around them, like floating between the stars. Then, the light receded, and when their vision cleared, they stood somewhere new. A great cosmic expanse unfolded before them, a boundless galaxy, its luminous arms spiraling outward in a breathtaking swirl of gold and violet. Thousands of stars burned like celestial beacons in the abyss, each one a distant, waiting mystery. Orion took a slow breath. "This is unbelievable." His voice was hushed, awed, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the wonder before them. Selara gazed at the endless expanse, her violet eyes reflecting the light of a million suns. Her breath caught in her throat, not from fear, but from something deeper, something she had not dared to feel before. "This," she whispered, "this is our future." She turned to Orion, her expression radiant with something new, hope. "Together, we will explore it." As Orion and Selara stepped through the gateway, the first sensation that struck them was overwhelming, not because they had arrived at an unfamiliar place, but because they found themselves suspended in an endless void, where time and space seemed to merge into one. The light of 1,000 stars wove together, forming a shimmering lattice around them, and yet, the strangest part was that they felt no movement. They stood still, while the universe turned around them. "Where are we?" Orion's voice echoed through the silent expanse. Selara gazed around, her violet eyes reflecting the endless stars. "I don't know, but I can feel something familiar." Then, suddenly, visions unfolded before them. Orion saw a future where humanity had conquered the stars, colossal starships slicing through the vastness of space, floating cities above distant worlds, technology so advanced it seemed almost like magic. He saw himself at the helm of a warship, leading an expedition into the unknown, bringing humanity's light to the uncharted corners of the cosmos. But he also saw the struggles, wars, catastrophes, and the relentless battle for survival. "Is this our future?" he murmured, awe-stricken. Selara, too, was caught in the vision. She saw the Nyxari race reborn, ancient cities restored, Nyxari warriors clad in radiant armor. A new gateway, grander and more powerful than any before. She saw herself standing at the heart of it all, guiding her people into an era of peace and prosperity. But she also saw the dangers, division, greed, the looming specter of destruction. These are the paths that could be, Selara said, her voice trembling with emotion. But how do we make them real? The Harbinger's voice resonated through the void, no longer cold, but contemplative. This gateway does not take you to another place. It reveals the paths you may walk. Orion turned to Selara, searching for meaning in those words. So what do we do? How do we turn these visions into reality? A long silence followed, as if the Harbinger itself was weighing the question. Then, it spoke once more, its voice a steady force of certainty. You must choose. The future is yours to shape, but remember, every choice has its consequence. Selara met Orion's gaze, her expression unwavering. We decide together. We won't let the past dictate our future. Orion nodded, his steel-gray eyes fierce with resolve. Then together, we'll carve our own path. Orion and Selara stood amidst the endless expanse, where the echoes of their possible futures still lingered like dreams yet to be realized. Starlight and the distant glow of galaxies cast an ethereal shimmer around them, painting a reality where time itself seemed to stand still. Neither spoke, both were lost in thought, absorbing the weight of what they had seen. We can't let these visions remain just illusions. Orion broke the silence, his voice firm with resolve. We have to make them real. Selara turned to him, her violet eyes reflecting the same determination. But how? This gateway, it only shows us possibilities. It won't simply take us there. Orion was silent for a moment, then spoke slowly, as if piecing together a solution. Maybe we don't need the gateway. Maybe all we need is the knowledge it holds, the data, the technology, the understanding of what could be. We can bring it back to humanity and build the future ourselves. Selara nodded, though hesitation still flickered in her gaze. But what about my people? Can we truly bring them back without the gateway? Orion placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his silver-gray eyes steady. We'll find a way. We have each other and an entire universe to explore. The future isn't set, Selara. We forge it ourselves. She held his gaze, and for the first time since they met, she smiled, not out of defiance or sorrow, but with genuine hope. You're right. We'll create our own path. Turning back to the gateway, they watched its eerie blue light pulse. As if waiting for their decision, Orion stepped forward and placed his hand on the ancient control panel. We shut it down, but we keep the knowledge. This will be the foundation of our future. Selara stepped beside him, placing her hand over his. Together, they initiated the final sequence. The gateway shuddered, its glow fading, the swirling energy slowing until, at last, the portal collapsed inward, vanishing into nothingness. But before it disappeared completely, a vast stream of data surged into Orion's device, storing everything they would need. As the gateway sealed for the last time, darkness settled over the chamber, broken only by the faint glow of the crystalline stones embedded in the walls. Orion and Selara stood there, feeling the weight of an ending and the promise of a new beginning. We should leave, Orion said, his voice steady. There's still so much to do. Selara nodded. Without another word, they turned and made their way back to the eclipse. As they stepped aboard, Orion cast one final glance at the frozen planet below. This place will always remain a mystery, he murmured. Selara stood beside him, her gaze soft, but it's also where everything began. They entered the cockpit, and Orion powered up the engines. The ship trembled, then lifted off, soaring toward the vast unknown. As the icy world faded behind them, Orion reached for Selara's hand, his voice quiet but filled with conviction. We don't need a gateway. We'll carve our own path to the stars. Selara tightened her grip around his. Together, the eclipse surged into the void, leaving the frozen world behind. In the distance, the ruins still glowed with an otherworldly light, a silent reminder of the universe's endless mysteries and its infinite possibilities.